Yet Bernie Sanders is throwing some serious shade at his record in New Hampshire, pointing out how Americans are suffering under his presidency.
The president has a right to be very proud of many of the accomplishments that we've achieved in the last 3 years. But the reality is that today, 60% of our people are living paycheck to paycheck. Our healthcare system is a total disaster. 85 million people uninsured, underinsured, while the insurance companies make huge profits. The cost of pharmaceutical drugs, prescription drugs, sky high.
According to RNC research, over the last 30 days, 23 of those 30 days, Joe Biden has been on vacation. Now, we've seen a lot of photos and videos of him at the beach, and while that might be fine for someone who is retired to spend that much time on vacation, to have a sitting U.S. president spending 23 of the last 30 days on vacation while we have so many pressing issues with this country is quite frankly unacceptable, whether it's a Democrat or a Republican. And over the last few years, we haven't been able to agree on a whole lot as a country, but what most Americans agree on, well, at least 77% of them, according to a recent survey, Joe Biden is simply too old to be running for re-election. So, obviously we have, some people who are, Joe Biden's age or even older, but they come off as a lot sharper than what Joe Biden is right now. And while I don't think that Bernie Sanders is intending to run for president against Joe Biden, there's almost no way he's actually going to throw his hat into the ring. I do think that he's kind of standing on the sideline right now and waiting perhaps for Joe Biden to drop out of the race, whether it's like a health issue or something like that that pops up. Let's hope not. We shouldn't really wish any harm on any president, doesn't matter what their politics are. But I do think that he's waiting on the sidelines. And then, of course, we have the debate between Ron Desantis and Governor Gavin Newsom. That's going to be coming up in November. And I think Newsom is also another person who's probably waiting on the sideline, ready to jump into the race if something does happen where Biden might have to not, be running for in 2024. So that's something definitely to keep an eye out on there. We have both Bernie Sanders and Governor Gavin Newsom on the sidelines, ready to jump into the presidential race if something were to happen. And of course, we have Bernie Sanders right now bashing Joe Biden pretty heavily, as we saw in that recent interview, even though he's definitely going to support Biden if he's going to run for re-election. He's definitely not Biden's biggest fan, and we saw in the Democratic primaries whenever they were running to face up against Donald Trump. Obviously, Biden and Sanders weren't really getting along that well. Sanders wasn't Biden's biggest fan. He was calling Biden corrupt, that he wasn't really for the priorities that the Democrats should stand for, everything like that, that he was more of a corporate Democrat. But now, since Biden's president, he's much more in favor of Biden. Obviously, he's going to favor Biden over someone like Trump, just because Biden is a Democrat and Trump is a Republican. So something to look out there for. But jumping into the main stories of today's video in regards to Social Security, starting out, we're going to be looking into an update on Ron DeSantis' view. Now, he's a Republican candidate who is going up against Donald Trump. It looks like Donald Trump is going to win, but DeSantis is having some changes on his thoughts on Social Security in regards to the full retirement age. So according to Florida Politics, Governor Ron DeSantis says people aren't living as long as they used to, so that should help protect them from losing Social Security and Medicare protections when they get old. He said, quote, "It should reflect life expectancy, and what we've had in this country is a pretty significant decline in life expectancy, and so, given those circumstances, to raise qualifying ages, it would be cutting against where the demographics are going. So that's not going to happen," the governor said in Iowa on Saturday. He also said, quote, "I think it started before COVID, and I think it's continued even here afterwards. I think it's more than just COVID. I mean, I think that there's death of despair. I think you have drugs," DeSantis said. Life expectancy in the U.S. has decreased to 76.4 years in 2023 from 77.28 in 2020, according to Centers for Disease Control and Prevention data. He said, quote, "So I think it's hard to say, raise the age for Social Security eligibility when the average life expectancy is going down. We used to think that life expectancy was just going to keep going up, and that's not been the case." So we have a lot of Republicans, including DeSantis himself, who are saying or previously said that we should be raising the full retirement age because people are living to be longer, and in future years, people are going to be living longer and longer on average. But you can see over the last few years that hasn't exactly been the case. So if we're going to raise the full retirement age for Social Security beneficiaries, but we have people dying at younger ages, that's going to be a huge cut across the board, because not only are people having to wait longer to receive their full retirement benefit, but they're also going to be receiving it for a smaller period of time because they're not living as long on average. So that's definitely something to think about. Now, I think the general consensus among the Republican Party is still to raise the full retirement age, whereas Democrats are against that. Instead, Democrats are for raising taxes on the wealthy, whereas Republicans are completely against raising any taxes at all. Now, in some other news in regards to Social Security, this would actually be some really good news. And for a lot of beneficiaries on SSI, this would actually impact you in a huge way, where you'd actually be receiving increased payments on a monthly basis. So according to the Disability Scoop, Social Security proposes update to SSI calculations. So the Social Security Administration uses a different standard to determine supplemental security income benefits for people living in certain states. Now the agency wants to update its rules to treat beneficiaries nationwide more equitably. The agency is proposing a new rule to modify how it alters benefit payments for those who receive what's known as, quote, in-kind support and maintenance in the form of a rental subsidy. Under current rules, SSI benefits are reduced if a person is paying rent or shelter expenses that are lower than the current market value or what they would pay on the open market. This is significant in cases where a person with a disability is renting from a family member, for example, who charges them a reduced rate. So let's say that you're renting out maybe a house that's 2,000 square feet, and normally in your area you might have to pay, let's say, like $1,800 per month, but instead you're renting from like a family member or friend and they're giving you a rent of $1,000 per month. Because of this reduced payment, your SSI check in turn would unfortunately also be reduced as well. So they're wanting to change this where you're not having a reduced SSI payment simply because you're finding a place, whether it's through a friend, family member, or basically wherever else, for a cheaper rate than what you would normally find on the open market. So they go on to say that, but due to court rulings, the agency uses a less stringent standard in 7 states: Connecticut, New York, Vermont, Illinois, Indiana, Wisconsin, and Texas. In these states, benefits are not reduced if a person is spending more than a third of their income on housing, even if their rent is less than the current market value. The proposed rule, published this month in the Federal Register, seeks to expand the more lenient standard already in place in 7 states to the entire country. The Social Security Administration estimates that about 41,000 current SSI beneficiaries would see their monthly payments rise under the rule change by an average of $128 per month, and some 14,000 individuals who don't receive SSI now would be able to qualify for the program as a result of the update. So we have a couple of things there. Because of this update, if they do make this change, as I mentioned there, 14,000 individuals, possibly even more, would then be eligible to receive SSI payments. So this would be a net positive for them. And then in addition to that, if this change is implemented, they also mentioned that payments would rise on average by right around $128 per month. This would obviously be very significant. It would take care of like your gas, for example. It would take care of a lot of groceries. This would be extremely helpful. So if they do make this change nationwide, not just in those 7 states, it would greatly help out Americans in general, at least those who are receiving SSI benefits. But that's all the news that we have for today's video. I certainly hope that you enjoyed and found value out of it. If you did, again, I would greatly appreciate if you could give this video a like. Consider subscribing to my channel if you have not already, and I will see you in the next video.